Lovely to meet you firstly.
And you.
So I managed to catch the documentary yesterday, and I think first and foremost it was incredibly moving to see you chat to these young men and boys about the sort of lives, their backgrounds, and sort of the struggles that they face, and to get them to open up. But one of the things that I really liked about it was that it wasn't kind of focused or centered around sort of doom and gloom. It really had like an element of hope. And I just wanted to know, was that kind of intentional in terms of when you were shooting it and talking to the men?
That's a great question. I don't know if that was our intention at the start.
Yeah.
But I think we're surrounded by a lot of negative messaging, and we were very conscious of providing a reality. What is the situation? What's going on? I was curious to find out. And as we were going through the process, you realise there are so many talented young men, and we're perhaps not providing the right system for them. There's moments where they might need to step up as well, but there is a huge amount of talent. There's a huge amount of desire from young men to work, to provide, to be good men, and somewhere along the line they're just not quite on the right path, or they haven't got the right support that they need. So yeah, we did feel there was an optimistic story to tell, which was great.
And you just touched on it briefly, but why do you think perhaps that there is still a stigma around vulnerability, and young men kind of still seeing that as a weakness rather than a strength? In the documentary you talk about challenges you faced, so to an extent you're sort of comfortable talking about that, but why do you think younger boys and men still struggle? Yeah,
I think that there's probably been generational, how do we learn as human beings, a lot by what's passed down to us, the evidence we see of our own parents or relationships that we've been a part of. And I guess my dad's generation would have definitely held their feelings in, would have felt the need to be stoic. But I feel like that's changing, and I feel that we realise that it's very important for men's mental health that we talk more, we share more. We're not great at doing that. You know, if I've got a group of friends that we have I'm part of a book club, I'm part of a group that play golf, I'm part of a paddle group, and slowly people are talking more about things, and they're recognising that that's really helpful. But I think women have done that for years. I think they've shared more. I mean, my wife shared things with her friends that I can't believe, really. So the conversations they have. But so I do think it's important. We need to offload, because really sadly, one of the huge statistics on men is the suicide rate, and I think a lot of that is either not having the support, but also carrying things with you, and actually by talking about a lot of those things, I think would be a big help.
No, I completely agree on the parents' generation point that you mentioned. I was speaking to my dad the other day, and he was saying with some sort of confidence and proudness that he's never actually cried at a funeral. Anthony, mate, I cry all the time, let alone at a funeral, which I just thought it was crazy that that's obviously how he's been brought up. And to an extent that was probably passed down to me as well. And I
can't get past a film, by the way, without crying, so never mind. And most of the family kind of look at me, here he goes. So.
That's so funny. What is it that you think that through the sort of the young men and the boys that you spoke to, what was it that they taught you that kind of surprised you the most, and that you weren't kind of expecting as part of the filming process?
That's really good. I would say that indirectly the blow to their self-esteem of not having work really hit me. I guess I should have realised that, but it's only when you sit and you feel that this cycle where they're applying for jobs, for example, they don't, you can get hundreds of kids applying for one job now. They don't get any feedback at all. So you feel the rejection, but actually there's a confusion around that. And I talked to Taylor in the documentary to say, look, actually, you've just been filtered out in a process here. So you've got to be careful not to read too much into that. Understandably, the rejection hits confidence, but actually he wasn't being rejected on him as a person. Had he been in front of somebody and hadn't got through the interview, he said, if it's my interview skills, then I'd like that feedback so that I can get better. But I think lots of boys now are finding they apply for a job, girls are finding it as well, no feedback at all, so they're kind of left with their own thoughts. I know if we left a player out of the team, or he wasn't in a team at his club, if we explained why, then that was fine. If we didn't explain why, then they developed all these theories as to why, and so many of them weren't on track, they weren't on point. So I think some of that feedback's really important.
Yeah, and it almost becomes like a sort of spiral that just you kind of get into your own head. And I was going to ask, we touched on it then briefly, do you think that we almost to an extent underestimate the impact of young boys and men being out of work? We saw the volunteering in the documentary and how he went in it thinking, oh, this isn't going to be for me, I'm going to not like it, why am I wasting my time? And actually had the time of his life.
Yeah, well, we found all sorts of wildlife that we'd never, either of us had witnessed. So I think it's there's obviously been a survey by Alan Milburn in the last couple of weeks about NEETs, and this is a huge concern for young people generally, the lack of working opportunities. And yeah, there's definitely, boys still feel the need to be a provider anyway. They feel that they should be the breadwinner. There's a bit of an historic inherited thinking on that. Yeah. But of course, within a few minutes of meeting new people, they tend to ask you, what do you do for a job? So very often our job defines quite a bit of our person, and if you haven't got a job, you almost answer that question apologetically and your body language reduces, and so the hit to self-esteem is really noticeable.
Yeah, and then I think it feels you don't have that income coming in, you kind of get into trouble, you're unable to afford like going out for beers with your mates and things, you start borrowing money and you just kind of go down this hole. And I just would like to ask, why is it you think that sort of young men today are struggling in silence, and that they don't necessarily want to? You spoke about your wife sharing things with her friends. Why aren't men sort of the same in that respect?
Well, I think there are some historic stereotypes as to how we should be, and I think that's changing, and it probably needs my generation and the generations under me to start talking about it more openly and being prepared to share, and for lads to realise that's fine. It's like we all go through struggles in our lives, and we all have moments where we've been rejected, and working those moments out are really complicated parts of life, but they're the bits that actually make you stronger, more resilient. We're resilient, a resilient species generally, and so I do think that I think this will start to change as generations pass, because people will be more willing. It feels like your generation are more prepared to discuss those things, prepared to be more open, and that can only be positive for generations to come.
No, absolutely, I completely agree. And I would just ask, what would you say to sort of a young man right now who kind of feels like they are completely lost, they don't know what they're doing, sort of between 13 and let's say 20, you're going through so many changes kind of in yourself, what would you say to them?
I would reassure them that a lot of that is totally normal. And pretty much every man has been through it. So there's the body changes, there's this moving from being a boy to being a man. At what point does that happen? I'm not quite sure, but you feel as though well, I'm not at school anymore, I don't feel like I'm a boy anymore, but maybe I haven't got work yet, maybe I don't know what I want to do for a career yet, but that's fine, you know. There's a small percentage of people that know at a really age, I want to be a doctor, I'm going to train in that, boom, off they go. You know, I was fortunate in that I could play football, but so many people don't know. So, and you might find out what you don't want to do a long time before you find out what you do want to do. So, actually, being able to get some sort of work experience is really valuable, or volunteering, as we did in the documentary, because you start to develop skills, you get a little bit more on your CV, which is good for potential employers, and you might think, I hated that, I never want to go anywhere near that ever again. Or you find something that actually I'd like to find a little bit more about that. It might not be exactly what I want to do. So there's a long game to be played, and I think probably when we're young we want to get there in a hurry, and it would be nice if it all worked out quickly so that we could just rest our head to one side.
Sure.
But I'm afraid life's a little bit longer term than that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I'm 33, I was a lawyer until a couple of weeks ago, quit my job. So, like, I'm kind of coming you fast, and it's all about that sort of trial and error and finding out what you like, what you don't like. And I think...
Can I ask what caused you to change direction there then?
This, essentially.
Okay, yeah.
I was very fortunate that, well, I guess not fortunate, but so when I was in law, I had quite a sort of rough time in terms of the toxic masculinity side of things, the competitiveness, the long hours, and essentially just had like a burnout kind of breakdown, which is why I then started sharing about it on social media. And I had the privilege to be able to kind of talk about it and share it and build this community, which I then kind of got new opportunities, and ultimately was working a full-time lawyer job whilst trying to balance all of this. And I thought, well, I really enjoy this and sharing and talking with other sort of young people in this space, and just around the well-being side of the workplace.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's how I met my girlfriend. She was a follower of mine, and then now we got the dog and everything, and I got to the point where I could quit my job and kind of make this my full-time job, which has been really
brilliant.
nice.
It was a great story. Very courageous to speak openly, but
yeah,
that'll have such a positive impact on people.
No, I hope so. It was hard work convincing my parents and trying to explain I'm quitting my job to make videos on the internet. But
that's generational.
Yeah, definitely. I thought my dad might have cried, he didn't. But yeah, just finally, as we wrap this up, as we head into the summer, I cannot not ask you while you're here. We've got the World Cup coming up. Is it finally coming home this summer, what do you think?
Well, the great thing is that a lot of the barriers to winning we've managed to overcome in the last 8 years. So winning a knockout game, which we hadn't done for 10 years, winning a penalty shootout that we hadn't done for 6 attempts, getting to a final. So I think the boys should and will feel really confident. You know, they'll go into knockout games with far more belief than we had 8 years ago, because we've got evidence of winning matches. So yeah, tournaments are still complicated and there are lots of good oppositions, but our boys are in the top 4 in the world, and I'm sure that's how they'll go into the tournament with that feeling.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and chatting with you.
Thank you. It's great to meet you.
Likewise.